thank you all very much for coming. I'm very excited to hear Betty and Jim's talk today about their time along the way, the Camino de Santiago. Thank you all very much for coming. There are more programs coming up next week on Tuesday. We've got another program about climate change, which should be fascinating. Molly put that one together, so get excited about that. With no further ado, thank you very much, Betty and Jim, for spending your time.
Again, thanks for coming to the program. It is an hour long, including some time at the end for discussion or questions. Along the way, on the Camino, it seemed like everyone was going by us. The reason for that was everyone was going by us. In fact, after it was all done, the only person we really passed was a woman with a small child. So we were able to pass a person about 3 feet tall. But as these people are going by us, they would speak to us in Spanish. Ooh, Spanish. That's right, we're in a foreign country, we don't speak the language. But this is what they would say, Buen Camino. And all we had to do was say it back to them, Buen Camino. That's it. So mostly all the Spanish you need. Although, one word you do need to know, and that's baños, restroom. Or worst case, por favor, baños, in which case you're begging to use their bathroom. But the reason so many people went by us is this year, 250,000 people are going to start walking. And they're going to keep on walking day after day, many week after week, until they get to a place in Spain called Santiago. Okay, I've got a cursor. Do you get a cursor? No.
Yeah.
To see anything on the screen is Mark Thomas helping us, and I think so here it is in the upper
fine-tuning here.
way up here in the northwest corner of Spain. Yeah, right there. Can you see it?
Yeah.
This is a little tricky because the cursor is different here. We met a woman who had started way down here in Portugal. She was doing the Portuguese way. We met quite a few people who started way over here in France, in a town called it looks like St. Jean, doesn't it? But it's, they pronounce it St. John. Well, those people would come up over the Pyrenees, down into Spain, all the way across here to Santiago, a total of about 500 miles. Many people think that the French way is the Camino par excellence, but we met a couple guys who started walking in the Czech Republic. To me, that's a pretty serious Camino. Now, what we did, we started somewhere in here, about 100 kilometers east of Santiago, and a lot of people do that. It's essentially the last 63 miles of the French way. So you can start in a lot of places, but all these caminos end up in Santiago. What's so special about Santiago? The word itself literally means St. James. This guy. He's the patron saint of Spain, the second apostle. He and his brother John were called sons of thunder. Hot-tempered guys, quick to take action. For me, he's one of the movers and shakers in the early days of Christianity. He spent a lot of time in Spain building up a church, a lot of followers. In fact, Spanish people love this guy. There are a lot of statues of him around town, as you can imagine. But he was martyred, beheaded by King Herod Agrippa, and his Spanish followers managed to gather up his remains and transport them back to a remote corner of Spain. No surprise, right here, Santiago. I don't know if I mentioned it, but the word itself means Saint James, Santiago. Sant is Saint, Iago, that's James. So the word itself is Saint James. His coffin and the artifacts, they stayed hidden there until a monk found them much later in the year 814. Now this is 9th century medieval Spain, and King Alfonso was his name. And he was up here in Oviedo. He heard about the discovery and he decided to check it out for himself. So he took a trip from Oviedo over to this area, which is now Santiago. And the path that he followed is now called the original way, the primitive way, or simply the primitivo. And we did meet someone who had come that way. Well, these early pilgrimages were mostly religious, but now only 20% of the people walking are doing it for religious or spiritual reasons. Well, the upside of that is you can walk the Camino for basically whatever reason you want. You just have to be willing to cover some distance. Well, we thought the Camino might be something good to do. It turned out to be a very good thing for us to do. You know, these people they love St. James. They're steeped in this whole part of Spain, the whole Camino kind of thing. And so if you show up on the Camino, you're coming to them, to their world, and you're, to some extent, showing some respect or acknowledgement of how they think about things. So you're welcome there. You have instant street credibility, if you will. And the people are predisposed to like you. It's a good feeling. Well, now, Betty's going to take us along the way. So, buen camino.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you all so much for coming. I can't tell you how much fun we have had reliving our experience and have the opportunity to share it with you tonight. This is a picture of Jim and I with our son, John. He lives part of the year in Spain, and he knew we had some interest in the Camino. And so about a year ago, he sent us an email and he asked us if we would be interested in doing a Camino with him. So we kicked it all around and we were different. Should we do the English way or the Primitivo way or whatever? And we settled on doing what I call a mini Camino, what my husband calls the wimpy Camino. Take it how you will, but I thought that would be the extent of what I would be capable of. So we stomped around all winter long on snowshoes, and when the snow melted, you know, we ramped it up on the trails, and then I was trying to hike again in the afternoon, trying to get the mileage up there so that I would be able to do this. And that said, I never got up to walking more than 6 miles a day. And so here we are, ready or not. We're in Escorial, Spain with our son John. We have our packs on. We're going to go out and get in the car, and we're going to go walk the Camino. And in order to do that, we needed to have our credentials. So we drove 4 hours to Sarria, where we were going to start, and we went to the store and we bought our credentials. And there, we have things over here on the table for you to look at afterwards, but this is what it looks like. And you need to get this stamped twice a day, and you have to do a minimum of 100 kilometers in order to be able to get your Compostela, to get your certificate. And I'm married to someone who has never cared about a diploma or a certificate, but for some reason, totally unexplained, he wanted the certificate. So this is important. And we went and we got this. And of course, while we were in the store, there was a rack of books to look at, and I had to look at them. I'm a retired librarian. And there, right in the middle, I am not going to try to work this cursor. Right in the middle is the Edible Camino. Well, Molly Harper, who is on the staff, had shown me that book here at the library. A friend of hers had written it, and someone else had illustrated it. I thought that was pretty cool. Here are the first 2 pages of one of our certificates, all stamped. And I wanted, while I'm talking about that, I wanted you to know that all the clothes we have on tonight, except for my shirt, which was my commemorative shirt, are clothes that we wore on the Camino. I saw one person with a pair of blue jeans, only one. All of them had tech clothes on and things that would handle the warm weather or rain or whatever. We carried everything in those packs, a change of clothes, ibuprofen, which we had to sneak. John does not believe in ibuprofen, and so we were kind of sneaking the ibuprofen at various times. There was extra socks, rain gear, a sleep sack in case we slept in a communal room with a lot of bunks in it, and our hiking poles. So here we are on May 25th with a Camino marker stating that we are now 102 kilometers from Santiago. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures from just our first day. This was a very typical path, very pleasant. And this was a very typical walk into a village. It was just beautiful. So I'm going to admit to you, well, I already have admitted to you, I was nervous about doing this. John is an ultra runner. He routinely runs 100-mile races. Jim has been constructing our house for almost the last decade. I'm the weak link, okay, here. And so I was concerned about how well I would do, how slow I would go, how much I would hold everyone up, if everyone would get bored. And I didn't say much, but John picked up on it. And this is what he said to me. Mommy, you need to make peace with your pace. I heard this more than once. I need to be repeated too. I took the picture of the snail on the second day it rained, and there were snails on the path the way there are worms here. It was just fabulous to see those snails. But I did use that sentence on a woman who was stressing out of keeping up with her group later on, and she loved it. And then she scurried off to try to keep up with them. One of the things that was unusual was the number of, they call them bars, but little cafes, where you could get refreshments. And the route that we were doing is the most traveled. It's the one that the people take who want to do a wimpy Camino. And there were bars like this, where you could go inside or you could eat outside. And this picture shows you 2 pilgrims, and notice how small their packs are. Well, they're part of a tour. So they would sign up and pay their money to be part of a tour, and that's all they would carry during the day. And what would happen is that a vehicle like this would take all of their luggage. We could get into a hotel, and there were cities that we did spend time in, and we could get into a hotel, and there would be just this long line of 15, 20 pieces of luggage waiting for the pilgrims to get there to pick them up for the night. And they only had to carry the small packs. But we had John. God, we had John. It was wonderful. He had driven the 4 hours in his car with us to have us start, and then he left the car where we started, and then he would walk with us, and at the end of the day, when we had gotten to our motel or hotel or wherever we were staying, John would run back to get his car. So however far we walked, he ran back and got the car. Now, on these trails, on the paths, everyone is going in one direction, except for John. And we would meet people and they would say, did he have green shoes on? Whatever color shoes he had on, they would remember, and he would come back. I saw people, they were patching up blisters, and they were putting bandages on their legs, on their knees, or whatever. He was just very upset about that when he saw that. But, so he brought his computer, so he could work at night or in the morning before we would go. Now, I guess you can probably guess what we were doing while John was going back to get the car. A nap. Definitely taking a nap. You also could have places like this where roadside stands sold food. Here the owner and her dog are taking care of John. And here's her car, just behind her stand. It's what she used to run off for an errand, while Barbara from Germany manned the shop for her. We had met Barbara earlier, and she was hiking the entire 500-mile Camino, and she was telling me that a friend of hers was going to be doing the same Camino that Jim and I and John were doing. She was going to leave the beginning of June. And she got an email from her friend, and her friend had just found out that she had breast cancer. And she had to cancel her Camino to have chemotherapy. And Barbara said that she had decided that every step she took from Saria, were 2 steps, one for her and one for her friend. We were delighted that we got to see her again in Santiago. She finished at the same time we did, and I was just thrilled that I could give her a hug. We also could have something like this, where someone would be trying to make a little money, and out of the trunk of his car would be setting up a table, and he'd have maybe bananas or different kinds of fruit or water bottles or whatever. And if you see, I forgot to point it out before, but the cello stamp meant that you could get your certificate stamped at these places. And John is lining up. You can see John right there with the hat on, getting some snack, probably for his mother. Now, just in case you think that all of our eating was done in humble surroundings, this is where we had a celebratory lunch in Santiago. It was splendid, just fabulous. So let's talk about the food. It wasn't like here, okay, not at all. But it was very inexpensive. For 10 euros, you could get 3 courses. This would be your entree, but you could have an appetizer, maybe a soup or something, and also a dessert, and you would get to choose what they were. This was one of Jim's meals. On the left in this picture is Santiago cake, which is the cake, the Santiago cake, that people eat everywhere. It has a slight almond flavoring, which was very good, and those 3 forks, that was we tasting that. And on the right is a tongue stew. It was delicious. This is Galician stew. They speak Spanish and Galician in the northwest of Spain, and so it was interesting to have some of the Galician food. This tastes a lot better than it looks. And speaking of things, how they look, barnacles. They require a lot of sucking. Okay, they're a lot of work. But here we are. These are our favorites. Our grandson, Alejandro, that's his favorite cereal, Choco Flakes. And I love chocolate, but Jim got really into Choco Flakes. And he had 2 boxes of those, which he shared a little bit with John. My favorite is on the right. If we went into one of those bar cafes and they had one of those chocolate croissants, I was a happy walker. All right, lodging. There was a mixed bag. Private rooms were relatively inexpensive, about 40 euros for 2 people, sometimes 50. Bunk type rooms were around 6 euros a person per night. This is where we stayed in Sarria the first night, an albergue. Sorry, I'm trying to pronounce that, if anyone knows how that's said. In case we stayed in a hostel type place with bunks, we took silk sleep sacks with us, which we carried in our packs. But I am happy to say that that did not happen. I was not really interested in having that particular experience, although I would have gone with it. But one of our kids was over visiting, and Jim said to him, what do you think the chances are that John is going to let Mom stay in a room with 30 other people? Well, they were 0. Here is the Casa Grande, just outside of Santiago, on extensive grounds with a pool, a dining room, a laundry. Oh, were we ready for a laundry? And a library. All the books were in Spanish, but it had a library. And I was told that that tree in the upper left-hand corner, that magnolia tree, was 300 years old. It was beautiful grounds. Now this, one night all the albergues where we were full, and John used his smartphone to use bookings.com, and a little bit away he found A Cantina is the name of it. And it was just a little bit off the Camino in Monte Rosa. So when we drove in, the proprietor apologized because he said that the Chicos, which is John's pet name for his 2 sons, boys, the Chicos had just arrived. He apologized. We were thrilled. I've listened to that video so many times. As you can imagine, there were a lot of churches. Here are a few. This church was from the 14th century, and we got to go inside. Most we walked by, but this one we got to go inside and get our credentials stamped right inside that. And in fact, the mother with the little 3-foot-high girl is the one who took that picture that we passed. Oreos. Oreos are granaries where corn is dried, safe from rodents. We started to see these. We had never seen them before. We had no idea what they were, and we just kept seeing them in different shapes and sizes. And so we finally found out what they were. Most of them have a cross at one end of the roof and with a fertility symbol at the other. And sometimes they have crosses on each. We saw hundreds. Literally hundreds of these, and they would have these have a different support. You can see why a mouse could not get up and around to get into that. We even saw one outside of a home that had 2 doors, and John read it for us, and one was for mail and one was for bread. We never had to refill our water bottles this way, but it was sometimes available. I'm not sure on other routes how many times it would be available, but we never needed to do that, but it was a good thing to see. Oh, let's talk about the flowers. And I want you to know I had to cut a lot of pictures of flowers out here. They're wonderful. Flowering shrubs, trees, and so many plants. Fields of them. And sometimes walls cascading with them. There were foxgloves everywhere. And if it wasn't foxgloves, it was often gorse, which pretty much covers Galatia. It was just the most vibrant yellow. It was gorgeous. And this was part of the grounds of one of the hotels where we stayed. There was something about this scene as we walked by that just stopped me in my tracks. And I haven't really figured out what it was, but it was just beautiful. I just stopped me in my tracks. This is a lace cap hydrangea. I don't think we have this type here, but it was so stunning with the center with the white flowers around the edge of it. Here's another variety. And if that's not enough, there was this one. It just, can you tell I love hydrangeas? In addition to the guideposts, there are arrows and scallop shell symbols to mark the way. This is what we would usually see. There are some stones placed on the top of that marker that are placed by pilgrims, but sometimes it might be a worn-out pair of shoes with or without laces. I always thought that was interesting. Some people placed fresh flowers, and they would still be fresh as we would go by on top. And the part underneath the arrow, if you were fortunate, had a marker on it that told you how much further you had to go to get to Santiago. And sometimes the markers had been taken off. It seemed like the closer you were to a city, the marker might be gone. But it was always helpful to me. And you know, I really like kilometers a lot better than miles, because they just clicked off faster. But this was very typical. And you can see some pilgrims down in front of us. Or you might see it like with this arrow on the building with the marker, the blue marker just to the right of it. And we could have gone inside and gotten some free hugs. These are some older markers. I love these because they had obviously been there for a very long time. Sometimes the arrow had been added. This is in a eucalyptus forest. And I didn't know it, but eucalyptus trees, when they grow, the bark falls off of it. And we have a picture later to show you that, but every time I look at the pictures, and you can see the bark on the ground that has fallen off of the eucalyptus trees. I couldn't believe how many pilgrims walked with a permanent magic marker in their pocket. It was terrible. But we liked this one up in the left-hand corner. Well, and Anita, your name is on there, but and I certainly thought of you when I saw that. But up in the upper left-hand corner, still walking, still smoking. And it was amazing to us how many people in Europe that were walking the Camino were still smoking. It was. In fact, we were almost always eating outdoors in the bars and cafes, and you would have to see which direction. They did not smoke while they were walking. But if you were sitting down to have refreshments, you needed to see which way the wind was going, because otherwise we really love this next message. Jill, before we finish, I'd just like to say every step has been better with you. I love you. What a guy. So here we are. We've made it to Santiago, the marker we had been walking toward for 7 days, counting down from 102 kilometers. You can't see it. I think Jim's leg is in the way, but it says 0. We made it to Santiago. But along the way, there were people who did not make it, and there were markers for the in memoriam. Because over the centuries, thousands of people have died attempting to walk the Camino. Here are a few of the. This was only from 1996. A young priest had not quite made it to Santiago. This was just outside Santiago. And someone had stopped and made the beautiful little flower thing right in the walkway beside. There were many that were humble, like this one. And after I took this picture, I thought the woman had just stopped to rest and to read something. And after I took the picture, I realized that she was in tears. So either she knew the person or she was thinking about someone she loved, and I felt badly that I had taken the picture, but not badly enough to delete it. We met some wonderful people on the Camino. This is a young girl, 17 years old, from Lithuania, who had walked all the way from St. John. But not everybody walks. You can bike, or you can ride horseback. You have to go 200 kilometers instead of 100 kilometers if you ride bike or do horseback. And these were the only horses that we saw. We did see quite a few people biking. We call these the three amigos. And they just were striding down past us. And we put this picture in. Please notice the 3 shells on the packs. A lot of people had those. They're the scallop shell that is the symbol of the Camino. And then we met this guy, Enrique. He was certainly the most unique person that we met. He asked us what our names were, he wrote them down, and then he went off in the and we were in a restaurant. And he came back with that, and when we gave him a few pesos, he offered to sign his artwork. And he had been on his bike for years. He had gone 30,000 kilometers. He had biked all over Europe. He had biked in South America, but he said he was going to stop when he got to Santiago. And we saw him a couple of times in Santiago, but I doubt Enrique has stopped biking. I'm not sure he could. So I suspect he is still out there biking somewhere today. And this is Hillary waiting for her group to catch up to her. She was on a book with a biking group from Australia. And they were doing it to raise money to help get girls off the streets of Cambodia. Trafficking. And her group caught up to us while we were still there talking to her, and it was fun to talk to them. They were, saying it was their first Camino and whatever, and there was one woman in the group who said it was her first Camino and it was her last. But we could not begin to count the number of people that it was their second Camino, or their third Camino, their 5th Camino, their 6th Camino. Well, there are 12 different Caminos, but some of them do the same thing year after year. They have long vacations in Europe, 4 to 6 weeks, and people can usually walk the full Camino in about a month. Everybody carries some sort of pack on their Camino. Even this guy. This was a barefoot priest that we saw a couple of days before we got to Santiago. We saw him a couple of different occasions, and so we didn't know where he started, but he was walking to Santiago barefoot. And speaking of Santiago, here's a family that walked all 500 miles with that baby. They had just arrived the day after we got there. They were very happy. She was really enjoying that ice cream cone. The day after we got there, we were in the square where you arrive, and this group of Italians came in. There were probably 10 or 12 of them, and they were so excited to be there. It was very emotional for them as they came in, and our Luciana had come from to be with us, and she was talking to this woman here. The cathedral is off to the left outside of the picture. That's the government building on behind her. And she was expressing to Luciana in Spanish or Italian. Luciana, I didn't know which language it was, but one of them, Luciana speaks both, how moving it was as a group. They didn't know each other when they started, and they had found each other and then had finished the 500 miles together. And you can see the man in the background on the right, he's wiping his eyes. It was very touching. John was like, Luciana, she's Italian, you know, she's all emotional about it, and, you know, John is like being a brick, you know, and I'm like, okay, I'm not Italian. Santiago. As you can see in this picture, the cathedral is in the distance. And this is a close-up with the sun on it. Although much of the cathedral is not open because it's in restoration, what we saw was absolutely magnificent. Construction began in 1075, and additions were done in the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. It was just an amazing edifice. As you can tell from these worn stairs, they've been used, and they were used by pilgrims. If you walk up these stairs, at the very top, there is a statue of St. James that as pilgrims is supposed to be hugged. And then you walk down the other stairs on the other side. And you're just these little narrow stairs, one person at a time. You walk up and you hug. And I'm not particularly religious, but it was a really hot day, and St. James is metal. It was great. I love that. And then you walk down the stairs and down into the tomb of St. James, where his bones are. And it was moving in the sense, it was very beautifully done, and it was moving to see how much it meant to the people that we were happened to be with when we were going through there. There are 4 buildings surrounding this square. There's the cathedral, and then there's a university, and then there's a government building, and then there's what was a hospital. This is John and Luciana on the steps of what was the hospital, which is now a hotel. The buildings were just incredible. So on the day we finished the Camino, 1,225 people finished. And the line was so long to get our Compostelas that we were a little tired. And it was very hot. We decided we would come back the next day. So this is the line just before 8 o'clock the next day when they opened at 8 for us to be able to get our Compostelas. It took an hour and a half. John said it was the most arduous part of our and here we are, 3 very proud pilgrims after we did that. Oh, there were so many wonderful things that we saw along the way. If you look at this picture, you can believe that this northern Spain gets 200 days of precipitation a year. Fortunately, we walked 11 days. We only had 2 days of rain. This was the most difficult crossing that we had to do. Not too shabby after hiking in the White Mountains or even the Belknaps. I look at this, 2 ancients on an old bridge. This is a eucalyptus forest. I can practically smell it just looking at this, and then you can see the eucalyptus bark on the ground. This, to me, was one of the most amazing things when we were walking. How does the earth, how is it so high on either side? It was like maybe a river went through there or something, but there were several times where we walked where it was, we were walking practically in darkness because we were so far down. We couldn't stop. So we had a total role reversal. We asked John for permission if we could go on by ourselves. And he said yes. So we continued on to the end of the earth. A lot of people can't stop. Santiago, it's not at the ocean, and if you go to Finisterre, you end up at what was, they thought was the end of the world, when they thought the world was flat. And so we headed out 2 days after we got to Santiago. So once again, we were counting markers. It was about 90 kilometers from Santiago, so here we are just outside of Santiago heading. You can go to Muxia or Finisterre, and we had decided to go to Finisterre. On our second day, John was running to Finisterre. So he was going to do in 1 day what we were going to take 4 to do. Okay. So this is John, who happened to meet us when we were having lunch. And so we were able to have lunch together. And he'd been running for about 4 hours here, and he had another 6 or 7 to go. He did admit that he was pretty tired when he got there. And I look at this picture, and if I were to give it a caption, it would be, where are we? And where are we going? John had given us an old smartphone, a European one, and he had gotten it set up. And so Jim is checking it here. Should we go straight or should we go left? And we were checking the guidebook, and we were checking the markers in the road, and the guidebook said there had been a change this year, and Jim was checking something, an app called WikiLocks. Highly recommend WikiLocks because it shows you exactly where you should be. And all of these things were very helpful to keep us so that we didn't get lost most of the time. Windmill Farms, we know that they're controversial, but we really liked walking near them. The path is going right up by them. It was a really unique experience to do that. Okay, the guidebook said, remember, John is not here. He's not part of the picture. The guidebook said, if you can't get to this next spot, there aren't many places to stay right here, but they will call, you can call these different hotels, and they will come and get you for free, and they'll take you back in the morning. Good deal, right? So Jim has called them. Nobody speaks any English. We don't speak any Spanish. And so then we went into a cafe in this, it wasn't even really a town, I don't think, and she's making motions like this with her hands. You know, yes, that's what we want. So she makes a phone call, and a man pulls up. This man pulls up in his Mercedes, and he's got a little 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with the name of his hotel on it. Yep, okay, we're good. So Jim and I hop in back, and we drive about 10 miles with this guy, and he's a pretty fast driver, and he's talking the whole time. We're getting the scenic, it's all in Spanish. We do not know what he's telling us, and he kind of slows down for this view over here and whatever, okay. We got to this fabulous hotel. It was wonderful. You can see the stone walls in the right-hand picture on the interior, and we had a wonderful night's rest and a great breakfast in the morning. And Jim got out a credit card to pay for it, and they were stumbling around, and we finally realized they didn't take a credit card. So we paid with euros, and we got back in the car, and he took us back to where we had finished the day before, and we were on our way without being able to communicate hardly except through sign language. John had lots of good advice for us. Lots of protein and carbs to give us energy. Drink Coke to have energy, and it's wonderful. Coke in Europe is wonderful. It has sugar in it and not high fructose corn syrup. I had a really good time drinking that. And he said that we should rest in the afternoon, and Jim's going to talk about this picture.
Well, this is in some ways, this is my favorite slide. It's hard to explain, I'm going to try. We had just walked about 7 miles. It was a warm day, and we saw this nice shady spot in a farmer's field. It was newly mowed. We spread out our rain gear and just dropped onto it and used our packs as pillows. We're well into the Camino now, and for me it was interesting. My brain just kind of stopped working after a few days. I mean, it would deal with the weather and food and things like that, but just kind of the essentials of living. So here we are in this field, and it just felt luxurious to just lay down on the ground. And we're in our shirt sleeves. The temperature was perfect. There were no bugs. And I watched the farm animals. I looked at the clouds moving in the sky. I ate some choco flakes. I drank some water, and the thought came to me, it doesn't get any better than this. It was like an epiphany, and I was trying to hold on to that, but I fell asleep. We both fell asleep, and we woke up later to the sound. Well, we heard some voices on the path behind us. There was some pilgrims walking by. So we got up and went on our way, but I can't reproduce the way I felt then, but I remember that it happened, and I'm glad it did. It was a special moment.
The sun wasn't always out. One of the days that we were on our own, it rained, and it rained hard. And if you want to be alone on the Camino, just ask for a rainy day. Because people take a day off if they're not pressured to get somewhere by a certain date for a flight to leave or whatever. So we had the Camino to ourselves for hours, absolutely hours. And frankly, once you're wet, it doesn't matter. I mean, it wasn't too cold, it wasn't dangerous or anything. And so you can tell that we had a really good day that day. We were soaking wet, but we had a great day. I need new rain pants, by the way, they didn't cut it. This was our last day, and we are approaching Finisterre. It's our last lunch, with the end of the earth is on the right. It was a wonderful, it was just so beautiful there. I'm not sure that I can express to you what this meant to me at Finisterre. We're out at the end, there's a lighthouse there, not photogenic at all, and we've climbed up and we're there, and there's one of these in Laconia, which is wonderful. These started with the World Peace Prayer Society in the 50s. I think it was the 80s before they started to be placed around the world. There were over 100,000 of them. There was something for me to have walked with all these people, yes, being passed by all these people, and to end up there and to feel like may peace prevail on earth. That for me was also a very special moment. And here we are, back to zero again. And these are our hiking poles placed on either side. I want to thank you so much for coming. We have some time for questions. I think you've got something else before the questions, yeah? Oh, come on, do it.
Okay. I don't know, for me, I was kind of turned off by the word pilgrimage. I don't know why, but I'm over it now. But this is is one of the reasons. Boanerges, there's only 2 people that I know of ever on the planet that ever use this word. It means, well, apparently as tradition goes, Jesus gave this name to James and John. It means sons of thunder. Lawrence of Arabia had a series of 8 Brow Superior motorcycles, and every one of them was named Boanerges. And this is the last one. It's the one that killed him. It's shown here in, I think, the British Imperial War Museum. Now, I would gladly make a pilgrimage to see that motorcycle. So that's how I kind of get over. I realized you can do a pilgrimage for a number of reasons. We went to Gettysburg recently. It's a good pilgrimage to make. So maybe think about what kind of pilgrimage you want to do. The word is okay. I'm fine with it now.
Okay, questions? Comments? Yes?
What's the significance of the scallop shells? Do you know?
Yes, I do know. Can I remember? There's a story with it, which I cannot relate, but there is, it has to do with a shape like this, and that all things come out from the center. I think it's where you, all things radiate from that center. And we thought that whichever way those spires went was the direction you were supposed to go in, but that was not the way that they were placed at the time. And I'm sorry, I don't remember. I'm going to have to go look that up, and I have read that. I'm old.
You showed the little stone passage, little bridge. How is the terrain most of the way, or all of the way? Is there any climbing on all fours?
No. It's much easier walking than it is here in New England. Much easier. The paths that we showed, you can have up and down, but the paths were wonderful for walking.
No tripping on roots of trees. And
so much better. It's so much easier than it is here. So much easier than it is here. There are no roots in that place with the big stones that went across the water. That was the most difficult thing we did. There were parts where we hiked for a long way uphill.
Yeah, just something to add on that. The guidebook will often have a profile, between towns, and it'll show you how, here's one here, it shows you how high each town is and what the elevation is on the trail that you're going to take.
The next day, so you could read up on it.
And that's a big deal. I mean, how far you're going up. If you're going to go up 200 or 300 meters in a day, for some people that's significant, so it's good to know what's coming up. So yeah, that's a good question about the ups and downs.
It seemed like you didn't have any pre-arrangements for accommodations in the evening. And
No.
with all these people walking this trail, how available were rooms?
Well, we were very fortunate when we were with John in that we had flexibility because he was going to go get the car. If you're part of a tour, you have accommodations all set up for that night. But there were people that they were walking and the albergues were full and they were going to have to walk further. And I think there are some people that take a tent with them so that if they get stuck, they can stay in a tent. But it did make a difference. John was using Airbnb and Bookings.com to make our rooms. And when we started, I was only doing 6 miles a day, and so we could easily have taken 10 days to do that if we couldn't ramp it up. So we didn't know, and I did not want the pressure of thinking I had to walk 15 miles if I could only do 6. So that was, that's a good question. I think it varies on how the person is going to do it.
was the longest number of miles in one day that you did?
We were doing 15 miles a day at the end, day after day. I say that very proudly. John took a taxi back the last night to get his car. Of course, I will say that when we went into Santiago, Jim and I had both come down with colds. He was running a fever. It was hot. It was not a great celebratory experience. He went to bed and slept for 12 hours. John and I went out and got something to eat. It was not some triumphant entry into Santiago. We did it. We did it. More questions?
How about a budget? Well, like, were the banks available to you?
There are ATMs. I could not get over the use of smartphones. You know, we did not get our phones so that they would work. We have, because John lives out of the country, he had gotten us to get the app on our phone years ago called WhatsApp. Do you all know what that is? WhatsApp. And we can communicate with him for free. We can talk to him on the phone, etc. And he had set up a WhatsApp thing for all of our children and for Jim and I, so that we could send out postings. Because I do use Facebook, but Jim and a couple of our kids don't. And so we could send out things doing that way when we had Wi-Fi. And almost every night we had Wi-Fi, almost every night. Sometimes we had to go down into the lobby, but we were able to communicate with the family. But there, people were on their smartphones just like they are here. It was amazing. Really, I could not get over it. I was very surprised. So people are using their smartphones, but they're able to communicate and get a room, whatever, and I'm sure we could set up our, if we hadn't had John, we could have set up our phone for a certain amount of money to be able to do that. But it's really quite reasonable. That's why people do it over and over again, because the lodgings are inexpensive, the food is inexpensive. It's a great, healthy way to spend their 4 or 6 week vacation. Paula?
With that many photos walking all at once, what was available for back facilities?
Well, I got pretty good out in the bushes.
I mean, with all those, I mean, without, just go out and watch, I mean, that's, yeah.
Well, remember, there are 12 different Caminos. We were on the Sarria to Santiago route, was the most traveled. And there were times when we couldn't see anyone. At 7 o'clock in the morning, when we would leave the hotel in some city and head out the door, you know, there were dozens and dozens of other people with their packs on that were heading out. But we would, you know, we would end up in the back.
Betty's in a special case when it comes to restrooms, so.
Are you going to tell them how special or why?
No, but often people start hiking, early in the morning, and they'll be done by 2. And they cover a lot of ground, and the towns are these cafes. Well, one of the reasons you don't have to carry much water is you go into a cafe, you need to kind of buy something to use the restroom. So buy some water. So all you got to do is get to the next cafe, and I don't remember the bushes being used that much.
Yeah, and he's a camel. Okay.
Sandy, I'm just wondering what you would carry in your pack for clothing. Did you bring a second pair of shoes?
No.
To be worn?
We had the shoes that we wore, and sometimes we would take them off at noontime when we had our lunch to let our feet breathe. We did have extra socks. We had 1 change of clothes. We thought that we would be able to wash our underwear and have it dry, because it's so dry in Madrid. It was much more humid there. We wore the same clothes for a week. So we just had that change of clothes. We had a rain jacket, rain pants, the sleep sack, a little first aid kit. Jim's pack was bigger, he got to carry all the extra stuff, okay? And we could have used John's car. That was, but we really were trying to have an authentic experience. And we just used our packs when the 4 days that we were alone. That's a good question.
Before cars and cafes on the trail, people were taking it without that accommodation.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know that we said, but people started walking the Camino in the 9th century. This has been going on for eons. I'm sorry, Jim's gonna, then we'll take your questions. He's forgotten. Thank God it was him and not me for once. Yes, yes.
I believe that the shell also means that in the 9th century, when they started, they used it to drink in the fountains on the way. There were no bottled water, and there were fountains all over for people and for the animals. And they used
So they were
the shells.
hunting in the 9th century, and I'm sure that they had to
They
stop.
don't have plastic glasses or
No,
anything.
yes, exactly. I mean,
So pilgrims have to carry.
well, it's like the Appalachian Trail today compared to 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Yes, yeah. Pam?
Were people careful with their trash to take,
Yes.
anything that they use?
It
to
was-
the next cafe?
Yes, they were very careful, and I felt like the thing that bothered me was the marking up of the markers. That bothered me. But I felt like if I saw trash on the ground, someone had inadvertently dropped it. There was some trash, but we're talking thousands of people are going through there, and there wasn't much. I felt like it had been inadvertently dropped. People were very respectful of the environment. There was, never mind.
Nobody wrote with their feet on any of the stones. Gilford was here.
You said what? Gilroy was here. They said lots of things on the
Probably
stones.
Spanish.
Yes, probably in Spanish. Probably in Spanish. Thank you so much for. Over here, and the Compostelas and our certificates, and we'd be happy to talk to anyone that's interested. We have someone here that's nice to hold.